Episode 108 of the Habs Culture Podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz alongside Liam Baum. The 2025-2026 NHL season is right around the corner, Liam. We are currently September 29th, so just a few days away from October. So we could say that it is pretty much October. That's when the NHL season starts. That's when the Montreal Canadiens start to play some meaningful hockey games that aren't preseason and things for us or Twitter to overreact to. But it is technically our jobs as, I guess, the host of this podcast to overreact to a bunch of nonsense that's gone on up to date in the offseason, in the preseason. Definitely excited to overreact, definitely excited to speculate, but we'll try and keep it as real as possible. Liam, September 29th, maybe just about a little over 2 weeks or just about 2 weeks until the start of the NHL season and the start of the Habs season. How are you feeling?
It's definitely an exciting time to be a Habs fan, for sure. This is probably the most exciting offseason, most excited. A lot of Habs fans have been coming into a new season, and I felt that like it was a really quick summer. Like it didn't feel that long ago the Habs were in the playoffs and the Panthers were winning the cup. So it's been a good turnaround, and yeah, again, excited to see a lot of the additions that the Canadiens made and see them in the lineup. And obviously preseason, like you said, it's can't overreact to it, but we're gonna give our takes, our overreactions, and yeah, we'll get into all of that.
So to date, the Montreal Canadiens have just played a few preseason games, obviously games that just don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's interesting for certain players to see kind of where they stack up in the lineup and maybe some sleeper guys for the bottom six squeak their way in. Younger guys like Florian Jacki, or is it a guy like Joe Veleno who's kind of had a rocky start to his career, but is he someone that could actually make a case for staying in the bottom six? But Liam, if there's one guy that's kind of stood out to you so far through the preseason games, or one guy that's kind of done the opposite and maybe I guess disappointed you in a sense, can you give me one of those guys for each?
Yeah, I mean, so just for context, the Canadiens have really just one roster spot available going into this season on forward, and that looks like their third line center position or winger, depending on if Newhook's going to play center or not. But um, I've been impressed with Kapanen a lot. He's looked really good in the preseason. He's looked good with Demidov when they've played. Even in those rookie games, he looked really good. Another guy who looked really NHL ready, in my opinion, is Florian Jacki. He's a big body. He works really hard. He gets in the corners, grinds out. He's that type of player that it's really difficult to play against. And I know he's very young. He played his first professional season last year in Laval, but had 25 goals. So if I'm looking at those two guys compared to a guy like Veleno or Sammy Blais, who have more NHL experience, I'd honestly rather a guy like Jacki or a guy like Kapanen slot into the lineup. Personally, I also haven't been super impressed with Noah Dobson yet. I think we knew that going into this season, he wasn't going to be in that number one defenseman role like he's always been in New York. He's obviously not getting the power play time that he was getting in New York, but just haven't been super happy with how he's been playing. He kind of looks slow, a little sloppy. Again, it is preseason. It's been 3 games that he's played, so you can't overreact to that. But yeah, a couple guys there that I'm happy with, a couple that I'm not too excited about.
Probably in the same boat as you, honestly, on most of those guys. I think ultimately it's also hard to kind of pick when you're seeing some of the bigger roster spot guys play. So your main focus is on, when Suzuki gets in the lineup against Philly with Slav and Caulfield. You're more focused on, okay, are they going to dominate in this preseason game? Are they going to score a bunch of goals? Which they did. They scored really, really early in that game against Philly. But I mean, I guess it is important to put that spotlight on some of the younger guys, especially when ultimately, yes, this year there's one roster spot available, but what is to come for some of these younger guys who maybe were picked, a few years ago that have been trying to work their way up. And at one point in time, you want to assume that they're probably going to take that roster spot. There's one guy for me that I would say, I don't want to say disappointed, but I'm not too fond of so far with his game through 4 games, give or take, is one Josh Roy and 2 Owen Beck. I think those are 2 guys that have really, really high expectations, or that the fans and the management have really, really high expectations for, considering that they've kind of been big time producers at the AHL level. And it's about time that you would think in their stage of development that they make that jump. It's just kind of unfortunate to not see them producing or quote unquote dominate play as much as you'd probably like at this point in their career in the preseason. And it's kind of, to me at least, and I don't know what you think, but for both those guys, and maybe more Joshua than Owen Beck, but it seems like his chance of being a long-term Montreal Canadian is kind of slipping through the cracks at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking down the lineup, there's not much center space left for a guy like Owen Beck. And I was a fan of him coming out of juniors. I thought he was a good pick in the draft for where the Canadians got him. But yeah, he doesn't look as good as Kapanen, and he's obviously not going to take over a guy like Evans this year. And there's still Nick Suzuki on the first line. And if Kirby Dach is able to pull through this rut he's been in, he will definitely be cemented on the second line as well as Newhook. So it's going to be tough for Owen Beck, and yeah, Joshua too. Already sent down, wasn't even able to last the whole preseason. Got sent down before a guy like Sean Farrell, who actually I thought had a strong couple games, but Joshua should be outlasting a guy like Sean Farrell, to be fair. So it's a little bit disappointing. And again, after 2 seasons ago, where he ended the season in Montreal, and him not making the roster the following season was very disappointing. And I'm sure he's very disappointed again. I think we should take a look at the lineup. We'll go through some of the lines here and give our opinions, because I do have a little bit of an opinion on that second line. I know we haven't mentioned any of those guys yet, but anything you'd like to say before going through this?
I mean, I'm not even going to look to the second line right now. I'm actually going to just jump to the third and give my thoughts before, because I feel like the second line is definitely a conversation that needs to be had. But the third line, the one thing, and I won't call it a concern, but the one thing I'll point out is that I really do believe that on this line you have, and again, this is daily faceoff showing it as of right now, but this is also based off of preseason play. I don't like the idea of Newhook at center personally at all on this line. And I like the idea of having Kapanen at center. I think Newhook's better suited on the wing. And I think Zach Bolduc, maybe if depending on where the faceoff is, zone, etc., can maybe step in for some draws. But I think Newhook is a great third line winger on a good team. And I think it has to stay that way. And with the way that Kapanen has been playing, I think you have to have him at center full time permanently, because Newhook at center, especially as 2C last postseason when we saw him against Washington, he's just not the guy that could be playing consistent center in this league, and let alone in a second line role. The third line role, I think it's maybe makes a little bit more sense, but I still prefer him on the wing, especially with the straight line speed. I don't know what you think of that.
I thought Newhook actually played a good end of the year last year on the second line as a center and was pretty effective. But again, that was on the second line. So I feel like in any position on the third line, it's going to be suited better for him and his skill set. Like, obviously, he's not a 50-point guy. That's been proven. He's like tops a 40-point guy, maybe 35-point guy, but it's able to produce on the power play. And maybe this season with Armia and Dvorak being gone, he's able to be a penalty killer and develop into a player like that. So I'll have to see a little bit more of him at center. But I think the real issue right now is the second line is very ineffective defensively. And sorry to jump right to the second line, but Patrick Laine, Kirby Dach, and Ivan Demidov all have insane offensive ability. And we've seen that with Laine scoring 20 goals last year in 50-something odd games. Demidov coming into the lineup, and you can already see his skill set is the highest on the Canadiens. Like, there's no sugarcoating that he is the best player offensively in terms of his skill set. His hands are unreal. His vision is tops already. He's going to be a great player in the NHL. But again, with Kirby Dach at center, who's already not very defensively responsible, they are pretty rough 5-on-5. Against the Leafs, they were a -3 combined. They did generate a goal on the power play, but it is a concern of mine that this line looks to be starting together come the opening game. I feel like a guy like Bolduc or even Newhook would be a better fit at center on that second line because of the purely offensive mind of all these players. It's very weak defensively.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm going to point out two things here. One, I think your point proves the lack of versatility that the Habs still happen to have. the 2C conversation has been a conversation that we've been having for probably the last 2 full seasons, and it continues today. The Canadiens did not address that in the offseason more particularly. They went out and got Bolduc, who's, I guess you could say, interchangeable between center and wing, but he's not the 2C of the future, let alone the 2C of now. I think your point is so valid in terms of the defensive responsibility. And it's almost to the point, Liam, that people were talking about Laine playing about 11 minutes last year pretty consistently, and that was with power play time. I don't see a world where he plays any more than that this year. And that concerns me for the other two guys on the line, but more specifically Demidov. Because I think if the Habs are going to want to win games, Demidov is going to have to be out there. And maybe it's going to mean throwing him out there in more offensive situations, or it's going to mean maybe throwing him out there on a line with Suzuki and Caulfield, when they need him most in the third period if Slav's not up to par. I'm creating examples, or I'm creating scenarios. But all that to say is that if you're going to glue Demidov with Dach and Laine, and already the defensive responsibility is not there, you can't be giving Demidov 11 minutes a game this season. I just don't see a world where that could be the case.
Yeah, I think it's really unrealistic to think you can be a successful team and play your second line 11 minutes a game when most second lines are probably averaging up to 18, 19 minutes a game. I mean, look at, for example, I like to take the LA Kings. They have a very strong first offensive line, and then their second and third lines are more shutdown defensive players that are playing a lot of minutes and shutting down other first lines. Whereas the Canadiens don't really have that luxury. They don't have a shutdown line. It's a lot of middle six guys who are offensively minded, but that's where Bolduc comes into play, and that's where Newhook can develop as a player, and potentially Captain can be a defensively responsible player. It's just right now they don't have that. And if Laine, Dach, and Demidov, who are guys that the Canadiens will depend on to score goals and generate opportunities, if they're playing 11 minutes a night, that's going to significantly hurt them. And especially if Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slav are being relied upon to score every single game, which, of course, your first line is supposed to produce, but you need that depth scoring. And I think that's how the Canadiens were so successful in the playoffs, or coming up to the playoffs and ended up making a playoff spot, is because their guys in the bottom six were generating chances, whether that's Gallagher, whether that's Evans, and Anderson turned it on. So it is a little bit concerning, but I think the offensive ability is there. Their decor is strong enough to stop players. And of course, Montembeault in net, I think he is a top 15 goalie in the NHL. So he's going to be relied upon heavily this season. It's just going to be a lot of mixing and matching. I don't think these lines are going to stick for the whole season.
I'll point out that I really am fond of the first, third, and fourth lines in terms of the individual players and kind of their role in a future contending NHL lineup. My point is that I think that Newhook is a third liner. Kapanen is a third liner with maybe, a higher ceiling as a third liner, but third liner. Same for Bolduc, same for Gallagher, same for Evans, same for Anderson. I think all those guys are suited to be playing middle to bottom 6 minutes, which is awesome. But again,
I mean, their fourth line is probably one of the best fourth lines in the NHL.
And I think they proved that in the playoffs last year, right? I mean, we've spoken ad nauseum about how good Josh Anderson is in that role. And he proved that in the postseason last year. And again, I think there's a lot of chemistry on that line. So there's a lot of good in this lineup, but I am concerned because I don't see a world where, and I know I've said that a few times now, but I don't see a world where that second line could be sustainable offensively to shut off the potential negatives defensively.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're playing against a very offensive line, like obviously the best defense is offense. If you're in the offensive zone the whole game, you're not giving up defensive chances. And obviously that's not realistic to do on every shift. But the problem is the Canadiens can definitely be outmatched by other teams' second lines. And that's going to hurt them, I think. So that's going to be something to see. What's your point prediction for each of the players on that second line? Laine, Dach, and Demidov.
It's a tough prediction because I feel like it could range significantly depending on usage, but I think for Laine, I'm looking at obviously more goals than assists, and I would say probably in the, weirdly enough, probably the 45 point range.
That's pretty low.
Maybe 50. Like I think that a lot the bulk is gonna come on the power play again.
Yeah.
And not much like I really do think that he's useless 5-on-5. I'm sorry to use those words, but I mean he's not like in certain sports you have guys that are good at certain things and he's good. His shot's fantastic, and you have to put him on the power play and exclusively that. Unfortunately, you can't run 11 forwards 5-on-5 and just keep one guy on the bench just for the power play. If you could, I think they would. But I don't know. I mean, I'd maybe bump my prediction up to 55 points, but I wouldn't go past that. Like I said, I think he'll probably get to 25, 30 goals, maybe between the 30 and 35 range. And then I think the rest are going to be assists, and you're looking at maybe 15 to 20 assists. So that's what I have for Laine. For Dach, I'm also probably in the lower echelon of 40 to 45 points, probably 45 points for Kirby Dach, with the upside of maybe getting to 50, but no more than that. And then Demidov, I think it's going to be really interesting because it's going to heavily depend on the power play. Like it's going to depend on the power play setup and when they find their groove, who's playing where. But Demidov, I can see being a 65 point player, 60 to 65 point player. I
Yeah.
don't want to get to that 70 point yet. I think it's a little bit overzealous right now, but that's what I see. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think Laine is going to produce. Again, it is going to depend on his usage, but I could see him having a good season. I thought he had his good moments in the preseason. He looked like he was skating a little bit better. And obviously, if he's able to get even half of that skating ability back that he used to have, then he's going to be a real difference maker. And that's what the Canadiens need. That's why they traded for him. And the same thing goes for Kirby Dach. Is if he's able to get back to form, which is going to be difficult in the first probably half of the season, but coming into the season and being able to participate in training camp and as well as for Laine this season, like you shouldn't have low expectations. You need to expect them to produce. And I think Demidov it's a big range. Again, it's going to depend on his usage. Is he ever going to make his way onto power play one? We'll talk about that very soon. But I think if Laine is able to score goals, then that's going to reflect on Demidov's point totals as well. So again, I don't think it's unrealistic to say he has 65 points, but I also think it's possible he could be that 75, 80 point rookie that, you don't see very often, but we have seen it in the past. And he's the type of player that has the skill set to do it.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think the upside is absolutely there. I was just trying to keep it more realistic in terms of who he's playing with because I'm not
Yeah.
convinced on this line just like you are. And just to put
Yeah.
in perspective, Laine had 20 goals, 13 assists, and 33 points in 52 last year. And so he missed 30 games.
That's like a
That's a
60
52
point
point.
pace.
It's a
Oh,
52 point pace.
yeah. Okay. So he's
So
definitely able to do it.
I think so, but then again, how many of those 20 goals came on the power play is my point. I'm not
16.
I'm not entirely convinced that the 5-on-5 is going to be there enough. And again, it doesn't change the fact that the goals are going to come on the power play. I just don't want to kind of overshoot it, knowing that that's kind of his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And one last thing to that point is that you were kind of mentioning the upside of Ivan Demidov. I mean, look at a guy like I'm going to put him in the exact same range as Matvei Michkov in terms of point production. 63 points in 80 games last year for Matvei Michkov. He had a very, very hot streak. He had a kind of a down streak. That was during Tortorella's stint with the Flyers. But again, like that 63 points in 80 games is so attainable. And it's not like he was playing with insane line mates either, right? Like,
and he was also like benched at the start of the year for like 10 games. It felt like he
with
was
no
playing like
minutes.
2 minutes a night. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so I think
It's a good comparison.
and I think that the Habs are obviously going to look to use Demidov more than the Flyers used Michkov earlier on, especially. And I think that's going to bode really, really well, right? If you're looking at, let's just say in the range of 14 to 16 minutes a game for a rookie, at least at the beginning, I think that's like a really good starting point. And then we'll see like certain games, I'm sure he'll get to the 18 mark. And I think that's going to be good enough to get him to 60 plus points for sure.
NFL fans, what's your favorite touchdown? For me, it's the next one, because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. From first touchdown score to anytime TD props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. Here's the best part. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Your team hitting pay dirt pays out to you. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, fees may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Minimum minus 500 odds required. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Yeah. So moving on, taking a look at the defensive lines here. It appears that these are going to be what the lines start at. I mean, obviously, Struble and Xhekaj are going to be the 6th and 7th D, but we'll see who makes the roster on opening. I mean, both of them will make the roster, but who will make the opening lineup? A bit of concern with Matheson playing with Dobson in the preseason. They gave up a lot of goals. Obviously, again, it is preseason. We can't overreact, but these are two guys who are more offensively minded than defensively minded. And I think that reflected on their play in the preseason. A lot of goals against. But then you look at Gouli Hudson, probably the second best second pairing in the NHL, if this is really their second pairing. But Hudson looks fantastic. Gouli looks fantastic. Gouli was banged up a little bit, but he'll be fine to start the season. I think it's another step in the right direction. Last season, I said he would come out as the best two-way defenseman on the team. And arguably, I think you can say that was a true assumption. So I'm excited about those two guys. And then Carrier, obviously, very strong defensively. The best defensive defenseman on the Canadiens. There's not many, but he is that guy, along with Struble and Xhekaj, who are good 6th and 7th defensemen. I thought Xhekaj has been pretty decent. He had a rough turnover last game against Toronto, but made up for it later in the game. He had some good defensive plays. So I really like the Canadiens decor. It's just that Matheson-Dobson line. I don't know if that's going to stick.
And I don't love it either. I mean, we've always ragged on Matheson, and I think the addition of Dobson has kind of alleviated that, I guess, responsibility that a guy like Mike Matheson might have had in the past on the Canadiens, right?
Yeah.
In that transition,
I mean, he's got to be a 4th defenseman now, right?
Easily. But will that be reflected in the minutes? I hope so.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that at a certain point in time, you go back to the earlier phases of this rebuild, he was a power play 1 defenseman who was probably playing 24, 25 minutes a night, which is way too much for a turnover-prone Mike Matheson. And truthfully, he has a lot of offensive upside, and he's a great skater. But it's too many mistakes at this point, and the addition of Dobson has given the Canadiens a reason to bump Matheson down the lineup in terms of minutes. And if he's playing more than Dobson, Gouli, or Hudson on any given night, I'll be concerned. I will.
Yeah.
Because he's not better than them at anything. Sorry,
what's his future on the team now? Because he's not even a power play defenseman anymore, right? If Hudson is PP1, Dobson is PP2, I know maybe they roll out 2 power play defensemen, but to be honest, I don't know if I want to see Matheson out there. I think there's other guys on forward who need to be given that opportunity. I just don't see him ever being close to that 62-point season he had 2 years ago.
No, he won't. I mean, last year he put up 31 points in 80 games on PP2. So obviously his production is correlated with his power play time.
Yep.
Which is totally fair and makes a lot of sense. The one thing I will note, and obviously this is more for the listeners than anything, but Matheson is in the last year of his 8-year deal that was signed 8 years ago. So
crazy.
So
that he
with
got
that being said, I mean,
years.
the Canadiens don't from Florida, or was it Pittsburgh?
I think it was Florida. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, it was Florida back in. No, you're good. That was Florida back in 2017. So, look, I mean, I'm very happy that this is kind of one of those last years because you don't really. It's kind of like Dach in the sense that there's not I guess there technically is a lot to gain for these two players, but there's not much to lose for the Habs in the sense that if Matheson is not the guy, or you're not going to get him on a friendly deal next year, or if Kirby Dach doesn't perform and he's not the 2C that you expected him to be, you cut ties and you walk away and you find your replacement, whether it's internally or externally in UFA or in the draft, but more than likely it won't be, and you move on. And that's the beauty of the fact that this year Matheson hopefully is going to be more of that 18 to 20 minute defenseman, no power play time, and not even 20 minutes. I feel like that's a little bit excessive. I'd give him the 18-minute range, and you say, and you tell him, like, you're going to be paired with an offensive defenseman. Your job is not to be the hero, because Matheson plays a lot of hero hockey, and you call it a day, and he doesn't owe you anything. You don't owe him anything at the end of the season. And if you need to walk, you walk.
Yeah, but I agree. I still think
It's a little
looking at
harsh,
this
but yeah.
decor, no, it is, and it's a business at the end of the day. And he obviously had his year where he got to be that number one defenseman, but that's obviously not the role he can handle. He can't be playing against a McDavid. He can't be playing against a Nathan McKinnon. It's just not realistic for him as a defenseman. And I think Dobson, Gooley, and Hudson are there to be those D-men for the Canadiens.